Welcome and thank you for coming this afternoon. My name is Marty Lehman and I'm the Director of Churchwide Operations for Mennonite Church USA. And behind me are a number of the CEOs of Mennonite organizations here in Elkhart County. I'll be sharing a bit of history and the background of Mennonite Church USA, and then Andre Gingrich-Stoner, who's here on my left, who's Director of Holistic Witness, he will read our statement, and after the statement is read, we will be open for questions, and any of the CEOs are also open for questions. Mennonites are Christians who strive to follow the example and teachings of Jesus on a daily basis. We believe that Jesus is our Savior. We take a Christ-centered approach to the Bible and our community of faith as the primary context in which we read the Bible and discern and apply its implications for discipleship. As Mennonites, we trace our roots to the 16th century Anabaptists, who were part of the Protestant Reformation. Anabaptists believe in adult believers' baptism and separation of church and state and reject participation in war. Anabaptist means rebaptizer, a nickname given to these reformers because their adult baptism followed their earlier baptism as infants. Other churches that come from the Anabaptist tradition include the Hutterites, the Church of the Brethren, Brethren in Christ, Old Order Amish, and the Mennonite Brethren. Today there are 50 Mennonite groups in North America, almost a half a million in the United States and Canada. The two largest groups in North America are Mennonite Church USA and Mennonite Church Canada. Nearly 20% of the Mennonite congregations in the U.S. are non-white. Worldwide, there are 1.6 million Mennonites, and more than 60% live in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In Indiana, there are over 60 Mennonite Church USA congregations with more than 10,000 members. Oh, I'm sorry. One other thing I wanted to, a number of the issues and things that I told you about the Mennonites are in this brochure, which are in the kit for the media.
I'd like to read Mennonite Church USA statement in response to Indiana Senate Bill 590, a statement which was crafted by the leaders of Mennonite Church USA agencies with offices here in northern Indiana. Immigration is a complex and difficult issue that evokes strong emotions. It is also a faith and moral issue. There's widespread agreement that our current immigration system is not working. But we must not let this frustration lead our legislator to adopt laws that do more harm than good. We are here today as leaders of Mennonite Church USA, leaders and staff of Mennonite Church USA agencies that have national headquarters in Indiana, representatives of church schools and health and human service providers, pastors and members of Mennonite congregations living and working in Indiana. Together, we stand opposed to Indiana Senate Bill 590. Among other things, this bill authorizes local law enforcement officials to verify the immigration status of individuals and to detain or arrest them for this purpose. This legislation could lead to mistreatment of neighbors whose first language is not English. It might result in more families in our community being torn apart, and it could turn local police into immigration agents. Our concern about this legislation is rooted in our commitment to follow Jesus. Jesus demonstrated that God's love has no borders. We remember that when Jesus was a child, he was a refugee and an immigrant in a foreign land. Scripture teaches us that we see the face of Christ in the stranger, and that we are to afford each person dignity, respect, and compassion, whether he or she has legal documentation or not. We seek to welcome the stranger even as Christ has welcomed us. We here favor sound, substantive immigration reform that addresses root causes of the problem, that preserves the integrity of our borders, that provides a safe, legal, and humane way for immigrant workers to contribute to our economy, that protects and strengthens the bonds of family, and that guards the dignity of all. We believe that SB 590 fails this test. We join our voices with other religious leaders from across the state The Indiana Chamber of Commerce, the Indiana Attorney General, mayors of more than 120 Indiana cities, and many, many others in supporting the Indiana Compact as a framework for a strong and fair immigration policy. We invite our church members and neighbors to join us in signing the Indiana Compact, which can be found at www.indianacompact.com. Standing with me, as Marty has said, are leaders of Mennonite Church USA. I'll introduce them briefly. Jim Brenneman, president of Goshen College. Rick Stiffney from Mennonite Health Services Alliance. Larry Miller from Everence. Sarah Wanger-Shank from Associated Mennonite Biblical Seminaries. Carlos Romero, Mennonite Education Agency. Stanley Green from Mennonite Mission Network. Stanley Croft from Mennonite Central Committee, Great Lakes. Lois Johns Kaufman from Central District Conference of the Mennonite Church, and Dan Miller from Indiana, Michigan Mennonite Conference, and Gwen Gustafson also from MCC Great Lakes. We are prepared and glad and eager to respond to any questions that you might have at this time. Yes?
What about SB 590? I guess of all the different things that it would do,
What specifically?
yeah, what don't you like, or why don't you like it? Like you mentioned, police identifying people.
Sure. There are 18 or 19 different subpoints in SB 590, and a couple of them seem particularly egregious. One of them is that it requires that English only be used in public meetings and documents. So I'm asking, this will cause confusion, and we think is counterproductive. I, for example, want my Spanish neighbors, speaking neighbors, to be able to read their tax bill or the notes that are coming home from school. Further, this bill authorizes local law enforcement officials to verify the immigration status of individuals and detain them and arrest them for probable cause. The author of this legislation said, Senator Mike Delph said, if you do not speak English, that is probable cause that you are here illegally. So I'm asking, imagine what that would do to our communities. There are co-workers who are immigrants, legal status in the process of getting citizenship, who have been stopped and detained and asked for their documentation. And so this could lead, for example, to racial profiling and harassment of our neighbors. It could lead to families being torn apart. It would turn local police into immigration agents. So they would be spending their time and our money arresting tax-paying workers and neighbors rather than investigating and pursuing real crimes. And it would turn our neighbors, it would make them afraid of contacting authorities, for example, when they witness crimes, because they might be afraid that the local police would act as immigration agents. So I ask myself, would we be better off if our neighbors couldn't read the notes that come home from school? Would we be better off if our neighbors were afraid to call the police when they see a crime happening? Would we be better off if fathers were sent away and children were here without parents? And for these kinds of reasons, we feel this is a particularly onerous and harmful piece of legislation.
I guess I'm interested, why did you guys want to make this stand? Do you have a history of sticking up for immigration rights and things like that?
If anybody wants to speak to that, I'm glad to. I think we take this stand because we're followers of Jesus. And because Jesus instructs us to love our neighbors and to have compassion on our neighbors and to welcome our neighbors as Jesus welcomed us. And so this is one of many ways in which we seek to be God's people. And we have brothers and sisters who are caught in the challenges of our immigration web, and they have helped make us attentive to the problems here. So it is in our effort to follow Jesus and to be good neighbors. Yes, in the media packet, thank you, Stanley. We have been wrestling with this issue for some time. As Marty said, we have numerous congregations across the country who include many numbers of immigrants. And in 2003, as a church, we wrestled with this issue and adopted an immigration statement, which is in your packet, as well as then provided resources for congregations to respond. And so we have been working with this for some time. Most recently, We were confronted with this issue when we have a biennial National Assembly, which is planned for Phoenix in 2013. And so legislation that was adopted there at a state level, because we were planning an assembly there, it forced us to come to terms with what's happening in states across the country. And now with this large number of Mennonites in this area, as this bill is making its way through the legislature, we felt compelled to speak on this issue as well at this time.
Besides the statement that you guys are reading, are you having people in the congregations like write their legislators or protest, or is it just going this far?
We're asking, which Andre already said, we're asking people to sign the Indiana Compact. We're asking people to write their state representative and to write the governor, Mitch Daniel. So to do those three things, basically.
We anticipate we'll also have some meetings locally directly with some of our representatives. And we encourage, I think a really key piece in all of this also is to be in conversation with immigrant brothers and sisters and neighbors, to learn the stories and to offer gestures of compassion and support, but then to be also a voice in the public arena. We are also going to communicate to conferences across the country that may be facing similar legislation, and from our experience here, inviting them to prepare themselves to speak in their setting as well.
All right, cool. Do you guys have like a certain percentage immigration in your church, or I mean, is it a high percentage, low percentage?
I had mentioned that we have probably about 20% of our congregations are non-Anglo. How many of those would be immigrant congregations, I'm not sure, but there would be a number of them.
The reality is we are 100% immigrants.
Yes.
We have all immigrated from somewhere, at least with the exception of a few congregations that would be in Native American communities. So I think it's important that we recognize the breadth of our own immigration stories.
You asked a question about our motivation. Maybe I'd just like to say a few more words about that.
Sure.
I anticipate most of us were in church yesterday, and we gather together and worship and spend time with Jesus to allow Him to shape us and guide us and help us learn to see things the way He sees them. And sometimes this conversation around this issue is framed in terms of whether someone's legal or illegal. But my deep conviction is that that's not the way Jesus sees people. Jesus does not first ask, are you legal or illegal? When Jesus encounters someone, He sees a human being created in the image of God who is to be treated with dignity and respect. Now, that doesn't answer all the difficult questions around the immigration debate, by no means. But it is the starting point for our discussion, and it helps frame the way and sets the tone for how we work at this issue. So that's very central for us.
Do you think, like, since most of the immigrants here are Hispanic, do you think that Hispanics are getting painted, you know, whether they're legal, whether they're illegal, whatever, getting painted, I guess, in a negative light is given this debate?
I think that the concern about racial profiling does especially affect our Hispanic brothers and sisters. Some of the coworkers I was telling you about are Hispanic and are here legally, but have been stopped, for example, for let's say bogus charges, for example, seatbelt violations, which weren't true, and were stopped, and then were asked to see papers and harassed purely because they were darker skinned and appeared Hispanic.
Did you have been asked, you said?
Yes, yes. And, yeah, please.
Well, I could also speak from my own experience as somebody that actually was born in this country and go back, my family probably at least 4 or 5 generations have been born in this country. Still, I'm amazed how many times I have been called illegal or simply assumed that because Spanish was my first language that this is not my country and that I am here in some kind of illegal way, or if that I'm legal, I'm still an immigrant in that sense, even though this is the country that I was born with, and my kids have been born here as well.
Nyla, I wonder if you would want to speak to the experience of members of our immigrant community. Nyla Jimenez works at the Maple City Healthcare Center and works with often with the immigrant population.
Sure. I think what you're speaking about in terms of the tone in which this conversation needs to happen is very important. The place where I work, Maple City Healthcare Center, we've started these groups in the community because we realize that oftentimes when there's a group of people that think differently than we do, we simply would like to imagine a future without them. And living that way and thinking that way doesn't set a very good context for what reality is. So one of the things that we are interested in, have been doing, is creating a safe space for people who are different in the community to come and have conversation with each other and get to know the human in each other. And it's been remarkable how this has changed interactions over the course of 6 weeks, which is what these groups meet, the length of time that these groups meet over. And it is very satisfying at the same time also very sad to see where many of these conversations begin, where people don't even have names for each other. It is, the illegals in our community. It's not a human anymore. It's someone out there in a part of the group that I wish I didn't have to imagine a future with. And it is very sad to see that even in a community with as high a population of Latinos as Goshen is, that is very widespread mode of thought. At the same time, very encouraging to see that at the end of some of these groups, people have wanted to introduce each other's families, and how special to see that we cannot change anybody's opinion, but we can shape the space that a conversation takes place in, and that is in and of itself life-changing for many of the Hispanic members who participated in these groups.
Thank you. Maple City Healthcare Center is one local ministry where a number of members of our congregations are active and at work, and it would be one example of kind of local initiatives that are part of this effort, our efforts, as well as speaking into the public arena. I wonder if Dan and Lois, there might be anything you'd want to say about initiatives in congregations in our region.
I know that there are some congregations in our conference who are writing letters to their congressmen or to their representatives in Indianapolis, and to Mitch Daniels as well. The congregation I'm a part of is one of those, so I've had an opportunity to sign my own name to that letter.
I know that there are several congregations in our conference as well that are doing that, but also there are other kinds of stories, like some people who have done trips to Central American countries, and as a result of that come back and say, I want to learn Spanish. And just that learning of Spanish is going to make a long-term difference in their perspective as they relate to some of these people in the community around them. There will be more understanding, there will be more openness to interaction.
A wonderful example of seeking to welcome the stranger and being brothers and sisters with each other. Any other questions before we conclude this time?
I was wondering, do you any sense whether, given the climate, there's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment out there, any sense whether there are more anti-immigrant people, more people on your side, and also, given that there are people who are pretty vocal anti-immigrant, does it make you, I guess, want to step back? And how does that color your willingness to step forward that there are some pretty vocal anti-people out there?
Maybe I'll say a few words, and maybe others want to join in. We recognize that this is a volatile issue that people are passionate about, and especially in a time of economic challenge, there's a temptation to blame other people who seem different for our problems. But we think that, I guess I would rather not see it as one force against another, but we are a community together seeking to find a future together. And just as Nyla shared, through conversation, through learning to know each other, through learning to know the stories of how we came. You know, when you sense a father who is desperate to feed his children, and so makes a long, dangerous trek, and is prepared to live far away from his family for a period of time, just to be able to support them. Suddenly you have compassion, and you engage the problem in a different way. And so I think we see that we want to continue to work at listening to each other, sharing stories with each other, and exploring together what are ways to work at this issue, recognizing that we have some real significant problems. More than 12 million people living undocumented in the shadows in this nation, and so we want to work together to find solutions. But we feel that SB 590 does more harm than good. One image that came to my mind is it's like putting a small dirty bandage on a large open sore. It approaches the problem in a way that runs counter to the spirit of our Christian faith. So we want to continue to be in conversation to explore alternatives and work together with everyone in our community to find a way forward. But I wonder if others want to speak to that question too.
I think there's a sense that there is some common ground in an acknowledgement that there's a great need for comprehensive reform. The problem is when we start doing this Band-Aid kind of stuff, where you end up then with a whole patchwork across the country of different states responding in different ways. That's not helpful. So the common ground is that we need comprehensive immigration reform. And that's what Indiana Compact is asking for.
And a part of that is to also look at root causes. There's a push and a pull that leads folks to leave their homes and make a dangerous trek. And so rather than simply an enforcement posture, we also need to look at what are the root causes that lead to migration and immigration, and how can we help people have fulfilling, satisfying lives with economic stability in their home nations as well, and to examine carefully some of the policies of our government which have in fact exacerbated the problems of immigration. All right, I think folks here, most of us are able to linger for a while. If you have further questions, feel free to address any individuals. We thank you for coming, and appreciate the press for your interest and for your attention, and are open and eager for further one-on-one conversations. Thank you very much.